Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here once again with Dan Michelon and Seth Krusman. We're all partners and planners in Brayshaw Financial Group, and I'm really happy to have everyone here today because this show is really going to bring us back to a little bit of all of our roots, which I think is really good. Today's title is Return to the Basics. I think something simple enough but clear enough and easy enough for a lot of our listeners really to benefit from in a number of different ways. So I think this is going to be a great show considering all the inflation and the craziness in the world around us. If you find yourself in that position, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to sit down with you and kind of go over your situation, see if we can be of help or provide any general assistance. You can reach us at 855-226-8551. That meeting is free to you, no charge, as we kind of try to see if there's a good fit there. You can also email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Love to get to know you. We appreciate you joining us today. Return to basics. I mean, I think from a standpoint of where everybody's at, we have this kind of very sincere mentality of, goodness gracious, this inflation's hitting my pocketbook. How do I save? How do I mitigate cost? How do I advance myself in the market? What's the next step? And that's a concern for all of our clients, investors, people who contact us off the show, people I run into on the street. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I think it's important for people, particularly if you have yet to begin investing and saving. I think after the show, you probably have some ideas on how to take that first step. And if you have been saving and investing, but because of inflation and certain factors lately, you've just done less of it, I think there'll also be some pointers here that can help you get back to where you were.
Gosh, the whole three-dimensional aspect of what we are talking about consistently with our clients and you here with us today on radio or podcast, however you're with us, it's a huge driver for us when we want to make sure that you're having a successful experience. We take a look at all sides, and part of that, a big part of that is, the foundational elements is where do you start at? Where do you start from? As we build, as we grow, guess what? We circle back and we take a look at what's changed and how are we doing what we're doing in the basics of our life today, because it is so easy to get away from some of the principles that we started with. And so I love it. I love this topic, and I know it's going to add a lot of fire in people's bellies that are out there fighting the good fight in their finances today.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Seth. And I think, for another set of our listeners, it's not only that they're not saving anymore, but they're going into debt, just trying to survive and make ends meet. So we're going to kind of cover a portion of that too and try to advance that conversation and help people in that accord. But before we get into that, we have for you our time when we spend a moment talking about current topics is money in the news.
All right, first up, we have an article here from Erica Landberg, and this comes out of Fox Business, a tech ETF with a gaming twist. And what the article is talking about is, ETFs, specifically one that has to do with gaming. And we've talked about ETFs here a lot as an investment vehicle. We like them in our portfolios because of some kind of built-in tax efficiencies, and we've spent a couple shows on that in the past. But what really caught my attention with the article was really two things. One is, during the pandemic, living with a teenager, I've seen the consumption of gaming go way up.
My kids don't do any gaming, Dan.
Well, I got my seven-year-old
Totally
learning Minecraft right now on the Xbox, so pulling my hair out a couple different ways. It's a growth industry for sure. It seems as though it just really isn't going anywhere. I'm not a gamer myself, but I know plenty of people in my age group, in the mid-40s and 50s who are still gaming and gaming a lot. So I think that's a business that is going to continue to grow and do well. But also kind of the background point to me, as I noticed and read through the article, was that whatever it is you're into, whether it's from a personal hobby standpoint or investment opportunity, is that there's probably an ETF for you that's very specifically, investing in the things that are on your mind and things you enjoy.
The fluctuation of this industry has been interesting to watch because, Dan, you noted that, COVID hits, everybody's in lockdown. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to eat moon pies and game, right? And well, maybe I'll just eat the moon pies.
I did neither of those, but go ahead, Seth. I'm gonna play with you a little bit on this.
Whatever your thing is, you did it, right? You were separated or doing what you were doing, and it's been interesting to see as we've kind of had this, relaunch into whatever the new normal is. But anyways, the industry is definitely taken a back burner. At least the inflows of the money in this sector has. It's not even a sector, folks. It's just a sector of a sector of a sector, basically. It's a little sliver of what's out there. But we've seen a decrease in the number of people that are out there gaming. And for me, I'm grateful to see that happen because I love to see people getting out and living life, doing interacting things. And anyways, if you game, you're like, you hate me already. But anyways, in this new next step forward, yeah, it's. I think it is going to continue to be a sector that, gosh darn it, there it is, that word again. That part of the investments that people want to consider because it is such a high growth opportunity as well. When there's an economy that's been fluctuating the way it has recently with the influence of inflation, people may not be spending that money out there going and doing the things that we were just hadn't been doing during the pandemic. So I'm anxious and excited to see what's going to happen in this as well.
Yeah, the article does a really good job of explaining the ETF and the idea that ETFs are the pooled investments, and it talks about that because they're bundles of stocks. So there's lots of different stocks that are in an ETF, and they're associated directly with that particular focus on a sector like gaming. But so they might include everything from Sony and Nintendo and all the different products out there that you see, but it might even include some of the chip makers. And I think the thing about the ETF space that's really strong is that they can move in and out of different companies and stocks without creating a taxable event for people in their just regular investment programs, but you can get into it. The concept of this, the article just makes a really good awareness that, hey, gaming is something you can buy into and be very intentional about that purchase. But it also makes a good point that it's any sector. If it's gold or it's if you're into farming, there's ETFs for everything. So I think that's really what's great about this. And I really didn't spend any time. I don't think I even played a game during COVID. But
I don't think I have since Tecmo Bowl.
Yeah,
movies, so it's
I'm still reeling from my duck hunt days, and how well I was a champion duck hunt shoot from behind the back kind of scenario. So
we don't have to talk about that Tiger Woods golf story though.
Yeah,
that was the last.
I had
time
an
I played.
Atari first, so that dates me a little bit differently. So, anyways, hey, next up we have an article here by Daniel Newman. And this is from MarketWatch, which is good. But the title of the article is Opinion: The FANGs Have Been Whittled Down to the Fantastic Four. And I think this is really interesting because it talks about all the different versions of FANG stocks. And if you've watched that, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Shopify, like they kept adding letters to it to spell some horrendous word. But it's been interesting and something we've been watching very closely because we do a lot of, blue chip kind of value and growth investing, and it's part of our everyday conversation. Watching some of these big stocks really tumble this year, and which stocks haven't, and I think it does a really good conversation in that. But out of the FANG stocks, it starts idolizing, and I think that's the right word to put based on how the article is written, but it starts idolizing Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, or Alphabet as people call it, as kind of the four runners here that have mitigated a lot of the loss issues.
Yeah, and it breaks down each one of them that have kind of held water through this or not suffered as much anyway. And one of the recurring themes that seems to support some of the kind of the leaders here is that this advertising revenue continues to grow and maintain. So it does do a good job of looking at each of the four of the FANGs, which it says are kind of the better of the opportunities out of the 6, and which of their revenue lines and which aspects of the business have done well or better than others, which contributes to really Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call it, and Netflix as kind of being the ones that have slipped out of preference here.
Yeah, the consolidation. It's what happens, folks, and we've been watching this sector just go on an unbelievable run. There it is, sector. It's the 6 out of them that have really pushed. We've had so many conversations around the S&P, how the S&P is making a run, and how it's weighted in these stocks so heavily. And it is interesting to see how some of them they do fall out of favor. Could you have called the Meta collapse or Netflix collapse or any of those coming down the pipe? I don't know. And will they return in some fabulous fashion here in the near term? I don't know. This is going to be interesting to watch happen as it does unfold. And I was curious as well around the Amazon piece there, where they some of the profits were hampered by the Rivian investment, and I am excited to see what happens with that part of the Amazon quiver as well of their investments.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's. I actually had a client who wanted to buy put options on Netflix about a year ago, and I was just like, I don't disagree. Like I didn't disagree with the concept of it, but you just don't bet against big companies. I mean, you just don't do it. It's just too risky. You bet. The desire to be capitalistic and to make money is something that's huge. I just think that betting down on that. But you know what? He would have been totally 100% right. But honestly, the time period they wanted to do it, he probably wouldn't have hit the numbers on time. But options are options. But that's. You're right, Seth. You're right. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, you bet. So here come the discounts, folks. There's some good news out there in the news. And what do we mean by that? Well, Walmart, Best Buy, Gap, Target, they are going to be slashing some of their, and oops, I almost forgot a couple of their discount stores like TJ Maxx and Burlington Coat Factory as well. They are slashing some of their prices out there, giving you some of the relief that you've been needing in this inflationary period. Thank you, Nathaniel Meyerson, for bringing us this article and some of the great news coming down the pipe, so that shoppers in time for the holidays might be able to hop on board and find some discounts out there at these stores.
Yeah, it's interesting that all these companies have, stocked up because of the shortages, and we're purchasing, and supply starts catching up a little bit, and then demand drops. Yeah. So it might be the one thing we need in relief for inflation. So,
I got to tell you, I was just in Best Buy the other day, and it was because Julian was turning 6, and he had this dinosaur earmarked that he really wanted, this toy from Best Buy of all places. And so I took Augusta in there to go do a little shopping for his birthday. Good luck finding a dinosaur on that shelf, because they were like really, really low on their inventory. And so anyways, that was one of the places where, I don't know, supply chain or whatever, they did not stock up.
They didn't stock up on dinosaurs. Poor Julian.
Yeah, what it does say, there's a couple things, particularly amongst these retailers, that because of the reaction to the supply chain crunch, it seems like they've clearly overstocked on, and it's clothing, furniture, and electronics. So if you're in the market for any of those things, keep an eye on some of these major retailers and some of the discount outlets that seem to be the beneficiaries of this oversupply, because it looks like there's some good deals coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for us in Money in the News, and we are going to be right back. We're going to talk about return to the basics and really bringing this all into play. And I think this last article does a real good conversation about thinking about where deals and affordability is going to come into play when you do need things. You can reach us at 855-226-8551, or you can email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with what you need to do next.
Ben, how often do we have somebody come into the office and they don't have a financial plan? And how critical is it for us to put the pieces together and make sure that their future, their retirement, is a successful experience? We talk about it all the time here at Money on Tap. If that's you, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Whether you have 100,000, 500,000, 5 million, look, folks, we have the right planner for you. Whether it's Ben or myself, Seth Crusman, we're here for you to get the plan together and make sure that that next step is right.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Michelon and Seth Crusman. And as we enter the second half of our show, today we're talking about the return to basics, the idea that, there's so much chaos, inflation, paying the bills, potentially running into debt. How do I still remain invested? Where do I invest? How do I keep up with that inflation in the investment space? There's just a lot of questions, we have all received from clients and people. Am I doing enough? And what are the things I should be looking at? So, our idea today on this return to basics is to kind of cover a lot of different broad topics and really dig into, where we are as a country, where we are as, each individual and what we're doing personally, and then obviously where to look to invest. And we're going to talk about that as we move forward. The first thing that I want to bring to attention is we have some stats here out of Market Watch, which is interesting, and kind of trying to understand what people are doing. And I think the thing is that the person under age 35 is saving on average about $11,000 a year, which sounds like a decent amount of money for a 35 or 32-year-old person. The thing is, though, is that even though that average is I think pretty darn good, and this is outside of retirement too, by the way. So
yeah, and this is actually the savings balance, not per year. That's what they have in total.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, that's my bad. But then the median, though, Dan, the median balance is $3,240. So here you've got, like, if you got 100 people, person 50 is at $3,240, but the average is way far to the right, more towards the So there's a lot of people with very little, and there's very few people with a whole bunch of money in the bank.
Yeah, I mean, in the article here, it references, in fact, that as of January of 22, 56% of Americans would be unable to address from their savings account an unexpected $1,000 bill, just the
$1,000. 56% of Americans, and I think they, I'm referencing back to a show, and I can't even quote the article or anything, but I do remember we were talking about at one point that because of COVID and all the things going on, people had saved more than they had ever saved before in their life. I mean, we're just like, the savings numbers are way up.
Yeah, with the stimulus money, it was going out and people had nothing to buy because of the supply chain issues, right? So a lot of that money was just getting tucked into savings accounts, and some of that fed into the market in that whole, Reddit speculative stock period that we went through. So the money was out there, but seemingly, at this point, based upon these numbers, it's been spent.
The numbers are looking high. There's just a lot of people out there that don't really have any savings at all, and the disparity is one of those that I think is representative, really, of the population as a whole.
I think the thing is that savings is always that last minute thing. Like, do I have extra money? Maybe I should save it. And this particular article sets. As I was reading through this thing, I was just set up a direct deposit. Just have the money flow automatically out. Just get rid of it, and don't think about it as something you're going to do after the fact. Make it a priority.
Yeah. So they suggest having that, not even touch a checking account at all. Right, go directly from payroll or whatever source your income comes from to savings with some portion of the money, knowing that whatever ends up in your checking account is likely to get spent on just everyday stuff. So if you've got a mind towards savings, The best thing you can do is do it systematically, do it automatically, and do your best to forget it ever happened, essentially. Just let it build up in that account. We just talked about the numbers for under 35s, but as you might suspect, as you go through the age ranges, the numbers go up a little bit, the savings accounts look a little bit better. Looking at the 55 to 64-year-old age range, which is when you really, got to be retirement planning or
like you're done paying for college.
Yep.
Now I'm putting every penny away I possibly can to catch up with the money I didn't do.
And still at that point, the median number is $6,400 with an average of $57,800.
I mean, to have that level of disparity, it's so much that gap is even bigger. That it's a very, very few number of people that are putting large sums away. Another thing we had done about the number of people who had under $100,000 in preparation for retirement and hoping to retire within a 5-year period, and that I think back about that number. I know there's people that are listening that are hearing that and so forth. And that doesn't mean that it's the end of the road or you just failed. I mean, there's always options. There's always scenarios, but there's conversation that needs to be had.
So what's enough? What's the right amount? Doing a little bit of planning here with you folks. Is it 3 to 6 months? Is it 8 to 12? It's really one of those things that as you take a look at what your expenses are, worst case scenario, job loss, income loss, or something along those lines, what do you need to be comfortable to make it through some kind of a period of transition? That's really the key. And that's just a little bit of, sharpening your pencil and taking a look at what you got going on. What I really enjoy is once we have done the things that are recommended of the automatic savings or, however you're going to continue to build a healthy habit around having that savings in place, there can also be this other side of that, which is I really haven't considered what to do with that additional savings because eventually you get to that 8 to 12 month or that 3 to 6 month level. And now there's an accumulation happening above and beyond that. And that is one of the things that a lot of people, I think, in this category of saving really kind of fail to remember. This is only a part of. This is not we build the savings account infinitely and then don't do anything with it. Let's get it in check and take a look at that next step because that's what an opportunity like our marketplace that we're in right now will give us. It's what is going to happen, for instance, in the real estate world, if that's the way that you want to be an investor, or what's happening in the stocks and bonds and market and whatever else. There's going to be opportunities. So let's take a look at how do we earmark that and take advantage of the opportunities as well.
Yeah, the article does a good job of breaking down for us what decade you're in your life. What goals you should have in mind and some things you should be particularly paying attention to. For people who are starting out in their 20s, you're just begun your career, you may be in debt to school loans or whatever the case may be, maybe considering starting a family. And they say, kind of the best bet there is to begin an automatic savings plan and kind of get that structure in place and then, really take a good hard look at the 401k or whatever kind of employer or retirement plan you have in place and really leverage that to the best of your affordability. And then as you move into your 30s, chances are you've started the family, had that home purchase, and are looking in the kind of the development of your career type times. You should be building an emergency fund there. You should be looking at life insurance, increasing your 401k contributions. And this is actually a great time to engage a financial advisor if you haven't yet, so that, as we go back to that word foundational a lot, if you're able to begin that foundational build of a portfolio and of a retirement account in your 30s, you kind of getting yourself ahead of the game.
Well, rule of thumb that I use for people, especially, I have a lot of clients who say, hey, my son or daughter wants to chat with somebody. Can you just give them a little bit? They probably listen a little bit better to you than to us. So I've had a couple of those conversations. And depending on where you're at, right? So you might be a person starting out with a job making $30,000 or a person starting out with a job making $200,000. There's a large disparity between every young adult out there in their 20s or 30s that are getting a job. But what I usually tell people is that, the first thing you should do, and, separate from tithing, because I personally find that, the first check you should write. But the second, that kind of next thing is not figuring out your rent, not figuring out your mortgage, not figuring out your car payment, but just taking 10% of your gross income and putting it in your retirement plan. Straight up 10. So if you make $30,000 a year, it's $3,000. If you make $110,000 a year, it's $11,000. I mean, it's just simple as that. Just go in with 10% and then learn to live off the rest. And I think that rule of thumb pretty much applies across the board for me with most of the people that I've chatted with, of just like, hey, generic advice, this is where I would start, is learn to live with the after. It's kind of like tithing. If you figure you're going to tithe to God after you're all done, then you're never giving the first fruits, like the Bible says. Like, give your first fruits, right? So you give to the Lord, boom, you're done. Give to yourself, and then take care of everything else. And if you learn to live that way, it doesn't become a burden. And I think that goes back to that point, of like just doing the draft.
Yeah, and have a strategy. Going open-minded. Don't be more of the mindset or fall into the habit of, well, after I've paid all the bills and done everything I wanted to do this month, what's left now? And try and, make that, meet your commitments, whether it's to the Lord or to your retirement account. You're going to come up short more often than not going that route.
Absolutely agreed. So, as we were kind of digging through this and going into the next piece here, people are always asking, how do we save money? And so Warren Buffett had a number of items that we had researched, and I have a few to add myself. But, one of the things that he has is that he pays cash 98% of the time, which I think is interesting. He doesn't object. He rarely takes out loans except for mortgages and homes, but everything else he's pretty much all cash.
It's a great way to do it if you can, and having a $100 billion net worth makes that a little easier to do.
Well, he's still eating McDonald's every day.
Yeah, and that's in his plan here as well. I think particularly in an environment like today with rising interest rates, the message there is clear, and it's a good one. Stay out of debt. Don't be on the credit card chain where you're owing 20% for every purchase you make in interest. It's just unsustainable to go that route.
One of my favorite ones is, I know I've mentioned it on other shows as well, is just he's such a creature of habit. Like every morning he lives like 5 minutes from his office, and he drives through the McDonald's drive-through, and he's got 3 different sandwiches that he'll choose from and a coffee, and it's like $3.17. At least that's the last time. A couple of years ago that we checked. Is probably like $5 now with inflation. But anyways, but he keeps these things in perspective. He just doesn't spend a lot on meals. And I don't look at Warren Buffett and say, well, he's just so strict on his budget that he isn't living his life in a way that is free. I mean, he's not limiting himself necessarily. He's just doing something that makes sense. And limiting the costs of the meals is one of the ways that you can really affect the bottom dollar in your budget, especially if you're looking to try to save more money. And it's a great example of somebody that doesn't necessarily have to. I love it. I love that. That's just one of the basics of what we can always take a look at, cost cutting in our budget.
I think, and one of the things that I think from a meal standpoint, because food is a very expensive item, and with inflation has really hit the pocket home. And a lot of people, just cutting out, eating out is a huge, that's an enormous expense. Like just eating out is expensive. But, people have date nights, and, I've chatted about people just going out to coffee and making their date night less complex financially. Go to a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. But if you are going out for dinner, just the cost of, and there's nothing wrong with going out to a restaurant where they have a waiter or a waitress. But if you don't do that, you're saving yourself 15, 20% on an increase in the cost. So, going out to a simple restaurant, and there's a lot of them out there that are just really nice. My wife and I, we do a lot of that where you just go to, let's go to so-and-so. We can just sit down and order, no big deal. We don't feel obligated to, how much do we tip and what is that number? We just pay at the counter and we go sit and have a conversation and talk. Those are kind of the enjoyable things. And it could be something as simple as a Five Guys, or, we sometimes go to a barbecue, restaurant place. It's got some neat atmosphere. But when you're adding 15 or 20% to any food cost automatically just because someone's going to bring it to your table, if you could do without, that's a big savings for a compromise too.
Yeah, and I've even started to notice, and for whatever reason, this kind of irked me, but, a lot of the places with the counter where you're just paying and going, now they pop up, how much of a tip would you like to add on? 10%, 15%, 20%, no tip.
Yeah.
And I just feel like a jerk with the no tip thing. So everybody's getting 10% for me standing in line, essentially, just because it's there and it's been presented to you. So, they're still finding a way to get in your pocket a little bit.
Yeah.
just yesterday, I was in that same situation, and they didn't do that. And I was like, well, flip the screen around and offer a tip amount or a sign here. It's just like the transaction went A to B, done. I was like, what happened? We're not going to tip this guy. And
well, this one I should have got a tip.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Last thing that I had here was just he doesn't really drive super high-end cars. You know, you never see Warren driving around in a Lamborghini. Although I'd love to see that. I'd love to get that picture.
That would be a good picture.
That's a visual, yeah.
Yeah, you know, cars are, you know, they're a depreciating asset. You know, some people like cars, some people don't. I do like vehicles. I'm definitely an avid vehicle fan. But that's, you know, I think everybody has their thing, right? You know, like I don't do games. Like I don't do gaming. It doesn't interest me. I have no, you know, I don't care about a lot of other things. But cars, I like cars, you know, so I'm more of a collectible liker, but, you know, some of them are out of my price range. So, you know, but you're right. I mean, there's just things. I mean, you can live your whole life in poverty and be wealthy, but I don't think anyone wants to do that entirely. So I think there's a nice, healthy balance to be found in some of this stuff.
Yeah, well, his last point was, you know, he only buys what he needs, essentially, and he repurposed a lot of stuff in his home over the years. And there's an example cited there where he turned a dresser into a bassinet at some point. And that's something that, you know, I think is a great idea, and you know, certainly cuts down on waste and can save you some money. But you know, that's a concept I grew up with. If you know, whatever it is in the house, you can find a way to use it again once you thought you were done with it. You know, you can save yourself $1, but you can also crowd your basement and your attic pretty quickly with that.
If you're reading between the lines, Dan is definitely my mellow partner on the spending side.
a little bit of a counterweight.
Yeah.
Budget issues.
Yeah, we sometimes balance each other out in that area. But you're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. This show's more for me and less for Dan, and we're returning to the basics. We're going to be right back. We've got some great ideas on how to move forward with investing. Don't go anywhere. If you're listening today and, you know, your questions are outside the box of estate planning or financial planning or any number of the pieces that we kind of traditionally talk about, don't forget that Brayshaw Financial offers auto, home, and business insurance. And we have an entire department that handles all of that for you. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 and be happy to take care of those needs for you. Or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Mickelon and Seth Cressman. If you're just joining us, we are talking about returning to the basics, and really just kind of, we talked a lot about, you know, expenses and mitigating expenses. We referenced some things Buffett has. We talked about Dan being my counterweight in the spending world, which is always helpful. He's probably the counterweight for Seth and I. So Dan's a large counterweight in that space, and we appreciate that about Dan sometimes. And but, you know, there's other ways to save. I really appreciate Buffett's kind of like general ABC scenario, but there's a lot of things that I really think are significantly higher on the list for the everyday today 35 to 65-year-old person who's looking at retirement, who has just been, honestly, I think, smacked by the recurring subscription fees. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but everybody wants $10 a month.
Yeah.
And you start going through, I look at my iPhone and I'm looking at, okay, we got a subscription here and here. And you know, every once in a while I go in there and I'm like, cancel, cancel, cancel. We don't need these things. I even limited my Netflix subscription to like only 2 users at a time. So I get phone calls like, Dad, are you on Netflix? Mom, are you know, like, who's watching Netflix? Like, well, we can all watch.
That's a great way to stay in touch with your kids, too.
Yeah. Side note. But I'm like, hey, we could all watch a movie together.
Right.
That's a novel idea. But we don't need to pay an extra $5 or $6 a month so we can have 4 people watching 4 separate shows when we have, two other subscription out there. Hey, someone else can find, I'm sure, some other thing to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I moved away from cable probably a year ago now, but that's the one thing, the subscription services, like everybody in the household just adds a channel seemingly whenever they want. And then, by the time I'm right back to the cable bill because I still have everything.
Yeah.
So keeping an eye on that is a big one. You can certainly pare down to really the essentials in that world.
I mean, people just don't understand how that nickel and diming is just, it adds up so quick. You don't even think about it. Like the music subscriptions, the this and the that. And I'm on my friend's music subscription, Dad, so can't we get this one too? Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, there's other ways that they get pulled in there that you're actually making me think about going and reviewing my phone bill, my cell phone bill, because, there was upgrade to this plan and get a discount for 6 months or free service with Disney Plus or whatever the other package was there. And I'm like, wait a second, I know I'm past the 6 months. Where has my cell phone bill gone up, $20 or what's happened?
I don't know about you guys, but they used to package internet and TV and everything together, and I think it was like $150, and it was it. But now my internet subscription is like $120. Like they've realized, like, hey, we're just going to keep charging because we got a monopoly on the space. So that's complicated and hard to address. But I think you're right about the phone. I will tell you, and I'll do a shout out for us, Sarah Vazani and Eric Morton, who work with us and handle all of our property and casualty, car and homeowners insurance. Have done a phenomenal job with our clients in trying to mitigate costs. I mean, I can't tell you, I've been innumerable people that they've sat down with who have had insurance for years, and working with somebody, just having somebody look at it and review coverages and this, there's just so many different things. I mean, I've seen 40, 50, even higher percent savings for people.
Yeah, I had to take a look at my stuff, just very recently. My stepson started driving, so we added a driver in a car, and she was able to keep my premium the same, which I thought was pretty astounding for a new driver coming in, and another auto added to the bill. And she was able to find another carrier without increasing cost from where it previously was. So,
yeah, I mean, she's phenomenal. I mean, they're both really awesome. And, I mean, they knock the ball out of the park over and over and over again. So if that's an issue for you and you're a listener, feel free to give us a call on that. They would be happy to take a look at that. But, I mean, you're dealing with some of the best people out there in that space for sure. But there's lots of little things that are a big deal. But I think the food thing still, resonates with me. Like we talked about meals and dining out and so forth. There's a statistic out there that American households throw away an average of $1,600 a year in produce. And, the idea that, people are buying groceries, they're shopping, they don't plan. They're not intentional. They're like, oh, well, I think we're going to eat this week, and I'll buy a little bit of this and so forth. And my wife and I have talked about it. I'm like, listen, we got 10 jars of like Ragu or whatever it is brand down in the basement. Because every time she goes shopping, she's like, oh, we're going to have spaghetti, which I know she's thinking, oh, this is an inexpensive meal. Inflation-wise, maybe she made us money by stocking up, but she wasn't intending to, So that's not a throwaway item. But and if anyone wants some, free spaghetti sauce, give me a buzz. I got a few jars.
I'll recommend Rayo's for those in the lookout for that. But.
Yeah, but it's just interesting. But but we overbuy, and being more intentional, planning your meals out, and figuring out when you're going to eat out and not wasting is super important.
Yeah, that's we have this issue in our household as well, and some Sundays we try and sit down and plan.
This
the
is
meals
your
for the
issue,
week.
correct, Dan?
It's we'll see about that, but we just do much better both with the money that we spend and equally as importantly the time every night. As we're trying to feed the household here. If we go and do it with a plan versus texting each other on the way back from work. Well, who's going to the store? What do we have? And just the stress and fatigue of doing it that way is, on top of the extra cost and the wasted groceries in the end, it's a major deal for us, and I'd recommend that to anybody.
And with some planning, you can get some solid, like really great meal. I mean, Seth, you're Seth is, if you're a listener here, Seth Crustman is an incredible cook. So he's like A+ chef. Like he cooks at my, like he comes to visit sometimes and he cooks at my house. My wife's like steps aside, lets him take over, and off he goes. It's pretty funny. Go ahead, Seth.
Thank you very much. I'll just receive that as growing up with a great cook with my mom, and I was forced into it, folks. When I left the house, I was like, I'm going to eat good food one way or another. And top ramen was not on the menu every night. yeah, you do it yourself and you learn. And, coming from Portland, which is a great food city as well, I know Boston, and you guys have got great food there as well. But one of the things I really appreciate in just getting some thinking about what it is that we're doing again. Folks, we are planners here, so we're going to lean towards that. Get the plan, which I love what Dan's saying, get the plan in your house and figure out what you're going to do. The other thing is as well, I don't think we do a whole lot of this is just generally as Americans, is negotiating and taking a look at all of these, parts of our bills and saying, well, one of these, we like the power. There may not be a whole lot of wiggle room on that one, folks, unless you're flipping it over to solar or doing something like that. It is what it is. Maybe you try to reduce, turn off the lights, which I'm constantly doing again and feeling like I'm my dad, telling people to turn off the lights or converting over to LED versus whatever you've got, the old versions of the light bulb. I don't even remember what those are called, but those are cost-cutting ways to do things as well. But that negotiation piece is like, you don't have to accept whatever the bill is. You can actually find lots of ways to bring that down. And talking about cable, how many times have I called up the cable company and said, look, this is what the increase looks like, or what you've said you're going to increase our cost to after whatever the teaser amount was, and just let them know, look, I think I'm going to go ahead and switch off the service and go a different direction. You'll be surprised what will happen next on that phone call, and just be willing to put yourself out there. It can be uncomfortable for people. Some people, it's like, oh no, I'd rather pay the $100 more, whatever that amount is. And if that's you, fine. But if not, maybe you can just step out of your comfort zone a little bit and try it.
Yeah, I made my daughter years ago call Apple because she was having a problem with her phone. She was probably, this is a long time ago because she's 21 now, but I think she was 12 years old, and I was like, it's like 1-800, call Apple or something like that, And she was crying. She didn't want to do it. And I said, well, I'm not going to fix your phone. You're going to fix it. You're going to figure it out. Now she has no problem calling anybody. But there's a learning experience, right? Well, what's the worst someone's going to say is no? Like, you hang up the phone, okay? And I think you're right, Seth. Putting yourself out there is important. And negotiation is definitely on the table. I can't tell you how many open box items. I was actually at Best Buy the other day, Seth, just like you were, looking for a kind of a secondary TV because I had a TV Go. I said to the guy, I said, listen, I'm just looking for something reasonable, not much, this, that, and the other thing. You got any open boxes? Next thing you know, I'm walking out with a really decent TV. Works great, decent quality. I paid half as much as I would have. The price they had marked on it, they took another 20% off of it. So listen, just ask. There's nothing wrong with that.
You just got me thinking about, I did the same thing at Costco. We've got some big trees behind our house and get a lot of debris and that kind of stuff falling in. And it's not that fun when you're trying to sit outside and you've got these little fir cones popping off the trees into your food or your drink. So we needed some kind of a cover, and they had one of those, it's kind of a pop-up awning that Costco had. I was so excited to be able to walk out of there with this thing. Now, it was already set up, right? So the next part of that was trying to figure out how to get that in the back of the car. So that was another level, folks.
So, we talked a lot about cost cutting, but, the next piece is to increase your income. A lot of people have had, and we've talked a lot about different ways to increase income, but a lot of people say, well, I'm already working. How do I do that? Well, I would say there's about 3 or 4 things that you can do. One is pretty much every boss knows that we have an inflationary event. And if you're a hard worker, you show up on time, you have all these different things, approaching your employer saying, hey, listen, I really need an increase in pay. That's a tough conversation to have, but it's an understandable one. And this is where, honestly, as an employer, this is where integrity comes into play. I'm much more likely to provide anyone in my staff who's, committed and, on time and driving this stuff. I'm willing to pay more for that because I know there's a cost to life and an expense.
Yeah, and there's a number of different, kind of do-it-from-home side jobs that have developed, through the pandemic. Whether you have a hobby that you'd be able to turn into revenue in some form or fashion. People have used things like Facebook Marketplace to sell stuff from their house that they're no longer using.
Get rid of the stuff you don't need.
Yeah, you'd be shocked what kind of market there is for, and this is just from personal experience, but secondhand toys, like these collectible old Jurassic Park and Star Wars. That's the rage at my house. And, you go into Target and try and buy that stuff, and you'd be shocked. But there's a massive secondary marketplace for this kind of stuff out there, and so there may be some things that are lying around the house just underused or not used at all that might be worth something to somebody. So
my baseball card collection is probably worth something now. I mean, it's old.
Yeah.
It's not, Ben.
It's old. It's old.
I've got the 17-year-old researching all of this stuff as well, and because there's a lot of old baseball, football, a lot of these cards and some unopened boxes of 87 Donruss and that kind of fun stuff to take a look at. But there's a lot of
Dan doesn't know anything about cards.
Oh no. You get all your Barry Bonds rookie cards in that box there. What's that worth?
Well, that's what I kind of gave him. I was excited about the project. I was like, all right, man, you're going to go try to figure out how to make some money off this stuff. And because he's got a friend that actually from school that has done very well. Like, I was astounded to hear how much money this 16-year-old is making off of, finding these cards and reselling these cards a lot of the time. Anyways, if there's, if you have something like that, there's probably a way. Well, some of the things out there as well, if you're like, well, I really don't even know what it is that I might do. There's websites that are dedicated for people looking for additional income, or the side hustle is another term. You might want to Google that. If you're just really, really out about trying to figure this thing out, there's a lot of resources. We've mentioned a few.
Yeah. I think one of the last things I want to talk about with increasing your income and the side hustle idea, some people don't want to get rid of their stuff, but you might have something that someone wants to rent. Like you have a tractor or a four-wheeler or some yard tools. I don't know, but there's people out there that rent everything. They don't want to get rid of it, but they're like, hey, I'm not using it for a long period of time. I drive by this one house, and there is a tractor with a for rent sign all the time on it. And every once in a while, I drive by one weekend, and it's gone. And that puppy's out there for rent. So I'm going to switch gears because we're getting short on time, and we want to talk about some of the investment pieces. And a lot of people are really struggling with the bank world. I know we hear it from clients all the time and looking for ways to invest. And the I-bonds are probably the most common conversation I'm hearing in the open marketplace. Like, hey, look at an I-bond. They move with inflation. If you hold it, you can start collecting your interest as long as you hold it for at least a year. But if you get rid of it within 5 years, they're going to take 3 months back of interest. But you're getting the inflation rate of 9%. That's great, but it's only for a $10,000 investment.
Yeah. Once you've fulfilled that, you need an alternative. You need someplace else to go.
So that's a great solution. So if you're part of the median person who's outside their retirement, is just putting, 3, 5, 10 grand a year away and so forth. Hey, listen, I would totally encourage you. Claims paying ability of the U.S. government. This is a great opportunity right now with inflation. I think that's good. And it adjusts with inflation. So if inflation continues to rise, it's going to go up. If inflation goes down, it's going to go down. But those are some super good opportunities right now. But CDs at the bank, 1%, maybe 2%, is a hard stick to take when you are looking at 8-9% inflation rates.
Yeah, so we took a look around the banking world and the insurance world and the investment world as to, what are some kind of easy opportunities to take advantage of, and separate from the savings, and we've kind of talked about some of the guidelines out there. We want to have anywhere from 6 to 12 months worth of emergency expenses covered. So if someone lose a job or something along those lines, and you want to keep that liquid in a savings account, but for the money that you can set aside above and beyond that, and Seth made that point where once you've hit that number, there really isn't much purpose to continue to put money into savings account at no return. That's when you begin to look at things like CDs or potentially multi-year guarantee annuities. And for reference, CD rates, a 3-year CD ranges anywhere from 2.5% to 3.25%, right? And that's taxable annually. It has some liquidity to it, but there are there's penalties for early withdrawal as well. Contrarily, though, if you look at a 3-year multi-year guarantee annuity, we can do as well as 3.9% tax deferred.
And I think that's the one piece that a lot of people don't, you've got the annuity world. We're talking about a fixed annuity, very CD-like. Like you put your money in and 3 years later you can take it out. There's one caveat. And the caveat is if it's pre-59.5, you're going to pay a 10% penalty like a retirement account would. The other caveat is that the gain, even though it's tax deferred, which is super awesome, 3 years, no taxes on a regular basis, when it comes out, the gain would be taxed as ordinary income instead of capital gains. So there's some things there, but you can keep rolling annuity to annuity to annuity and keep deferring that gain until the day you want to pay. But I think when you're looking at a 2.5 to 3.25, 3.5% CD rate versus almost a 4% annuity rate, that's a significant diversion between the two. I mean, enough that, hey, listen, tax deferral on top of it is an additional add-on to that return. But what I would tell you, and I would be buyer beware, annuity rates, they're higher, but the risk on a bank rate that's higher than another bank rate is the fact of their deposits. We've talked about this in the past. Like, banks offer higher rates because they need more money internally to offset their loan ratios. And that creates an overnight lending fee that's very, very expensive for them. And so they'll offer higher rates because that's still cheaper than that. Now, banks go out of business every year. There's banks that always go out of business. So you don't want to be caught in that, but buyer beware if you see a rate at a bank that's really too good to be true. There's potential risk inside that. So you want to make sure your FDIC coverage is in place and so forth. Inversely, like the 5-year, I mean, this is really phenomenal. I look at the 5-year, Dan, and I'm saying to myself, a 5-year fixed annuity, no risk, over 4.5%.
Tax deferred.
Tax deferred. I mean, that is phenomenal. So if you're looking at a CD for 5 years, you're probably looking at close to maybe only 60% of that return, this is phenomenal. And I think these are good rates to consider.
Yeah, and there's alternatives beyond that as well. If you're in a position of being able to take a little bit of risk, not in your principal, but a risk in terms of what it is that you're earning, there are index annuities, right, that are guaranteed and fixed and associated with a major market index that offer even more upside. A 3-year index annuity that we have here on the shelf has an S&P cap on it at 6.25%. So that's a 3-year option where you can be in and out in 3 years, and with the ability to participate in the index performance up to an annual cap of 6.25%, which is basically 3 times the average CD rate. And from a 5-year perspective, you can get up to an 8.25% cap, 8.25%. And there's one particular product that we've used here that will actually give you at the end of the 5 years a minimum guarantee of a 3% return, 3% simple interest. So you put $100,000 in, at the end of 5 years, you'll have no less than $115,000 if the 8.25% cap on the S&P 500 doesn't outperform that.
So that 8.25% cap is annual, and I think this is what's really good. I mean, I had a client who had a large sum of money sitting in cash. I've actually had 3 clients in this same scenario, but I just said to him, I said, listen, we're making virtually nothing at the bank. You're sitting in cash. Money's been sitting there for years. Why don't we stick a portion of it over here in 5 years, you're guaranteed a minimum of 15% rate of return fixed. Okay, like that's, 100,000 going to 115. But you have an 8.25% cap on the S&P 500 with zero risk. So that, it's pretty phenomenal to think through that in the idea that every year, if the S&P is doing anything north of 0, you're getting credited that percentage rate up to 8.25. I mean, for somebody who's really saying I need a cash asset, that's pretty phenomenal. Now, there is some liquidity options to this too, which makes it pretty interesting as well. And there's a waiver to waive any returns that you've had to get out early and so forth. And there's more details to that. But this is the thing, folks. Keep the money moving forward. If you just have it install, I mean, even if you don't like the fixed annuity option or the index annuity option, at least go to a CD. I'd rather see you make 2%. That's still 2% less of the 8% inflation you have to catch up on. If we can get 4 or 5 or 6, I mean, we can make an annuity work for you in a way that helps that money combat inflation. That's where we need to focus, and that's the most important thing.
I got to just come back to the three-dimensional investing piece here, folks. That's what we're talking about, and continue to bring it back into this, this back to basics conversation, the saving, the planning, the different ways that you can layer your investments, and the different ways that you can increase your savings rate or, kind of recommit to having an established savings plan as part of your plan, and how significant that really is. So there you have it. Back to basics. a lot of fun here today. And if you are a part of the fold here at Brayshaw Financial Group, it is wonderful to spend time with you. If you're a first-time listener, if you're coming back, feel free to reach out at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com and really experience what it is to be a part of three-dimensional investing and complete wealth management here with us at Money on Tap and Brayshaw Financial Group. Make it a wonderful week, folks.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.